A very good day to all of you out there. This is Admav here with another episode of Admav's Corner. I hope you all are doing well. You're of course very welcome here. This is a safe space to discuss whatever is on your mind. I would like to first start off by saying a few things. With the topics that I'm going to end up discussing in this episode, I just want to say that I'm not an expert. I'm not of the medical profession. So this is just from personal anecdotes, personal experiences, and I'm just sharing this firstly as a form of self-therapy, but also to provide a different perspective to those of you that may be experiencing similar things or maybe know somebody experiencing similar things, and hopefully this will give you a point of view that is in any way beneficial, because the things I want to talk about in this episode, they're not easy to deal with. So before I go any further, what I kind of want to talk today about is depression. This is something that few people are well equipped to deal with, whether it's to deal with it firsthand or, to deal with it when it comes to a person that they love or a person that they know well. And even now, I'm sort of having a difficult time formulating sentences just because I know how heavy this topic is. But before we really heavily get into it, I just hope that you've all had a good week so far. I personally have had a pretty up and down week. Not bad, not great. But I'm thankful for it nonetheless. There's always things to learn. There's always things to experience. A very close friend of mine recently shared with me some not so great news about what's going on with their life. And this friend of mine, I love them. And honestly, to me, they're pretty much a sibling. And I'm very close with them. Without going into too much detail, they recently broke up with their significant other, who they really loved. And you may notice that I'm using they, them. I just want to keep this story as, neutral as possible, because I don't want to divulge any personal information regarding my friend. But they were really torn up about this. And their sadness was really palpable. And myself being somewhat of an empath, I guess you could say. I really don't like labeling things, but if you were to label it, I would be an empath. I really felt for them. And it just really made me think about things. It made me think about depression, because it is clear that that is what they are going through at this time. And it's a natural response to difficult moments in your life that you experience. And sometimes it's not logical, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's proportionate to the event that happened, and sometimes it isn't. That's what's complicated about talking about depression. It's not the same across the board for everybody. Everybody experiences it in a different way. Everybody deals with it in a different way. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. The only thing that makes sense is that feeling of deep, aching sadness in your soul when you are going through it. That is the only real clear thing. And I've been experiencing that all my life, even until this point. At work yesterday, I went to a specific section of the facility that I work in that I worked in maybe a couple months ago, I think it was. And it was an interesting experience. So just to clear things up a little bit, at the place that I work, we have sort of monthly rotations, and we get placed in different areas of the facility, and our tasks change every month. Well, for the most part, they change. A lot of times, the tasks are similar and you're just in a different area, but I digress. So this particular area that I went to and worked at yesterday invoked a lot of emotions in me, a lot of different emotions, and I didn't expect that. It was actually a really bizarre feeling when I went there. It was like a time warp. It was like bringing me back to April of this year. And the reason why that's so significant is because in April, my ex-girlfriend and I broke up mutually. And though it was a mutual breakup, it still didn't feel great. I had really serious feelings for her, but we were both at different places in our lives, and things just they were just not going to work out between us. And I accepted it, and I knew the best thing for both of us, not just for her, was to break the relationship apart and say goodbye to each other, at least in a romantic capacity. And that was a very tough time for me. I mean, I took a day off immediately after it happened. I didn't even want to. It's literally the only day off I've had since I started working at this place. But I had to do it. There was no way I would have been in the right mind working if I pushed myself to go to work. And so when I went to this area in the facility, those feelings sort of, I wouldn't say they resurfaced, but I kind of it was like a reminder of that time, It's like, when you smell a certain scent or a food, and it brings you back to a certain time of your life and how you felt. It was sort of the same thing. I went to that area, that aisle, and I was just taken aback because things flooded back, all the events that happened in April. And consequently, echoes of the emotions I had experienced then. The sadness that I felt, the feelings of disbelief. I couldn't believe that it was over. I couldn't believe that, just days ago we were having a great time together, and then just days later it was like we never met. It's interesting how emotions get invoked like that, And it really made me reflect on the importance of that, the importance of emotions, how the full gamut of the emotional spectrum is such a beautiful thing to experience. Joy, excitement, anxiety, both in a positive and a negative sense, because it can be positive or negative, right? Anxiety because you don't know if you're gonna die tomorrow is obviously a negative thing, but if it's like anxiety from waiting for your fiance to walk down the aisle so that you can get married. That's a good type of anxiety. That's a good anxiety to have. So, these are all amazing emotions. And funnily enough, and I'm not going to, delve too much into this on this episode, but you experience that full gamut of emotions when you feel love. It's a weird thing, love, right? It's such a strange, I mean, you could almost say miraculous feeling. Like, it encompasses all of that. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when you're depressed, depression robs you of that full spectrum of emotions. You're unable to feel all those other things because all you're feeling is this deep, lasting, or what feels like a lasting sadness that eventually feels like emptiness, like a void, or like any other emotion that you could potentially feel just gets sucked into this black hole that's just deeply buried in your soul. And it's hard for me to even kind of talk about because of how real that feels and how real that is. And even though I've made strides and, within myself, my own personal growth, understanding myself and loving myself like we've been talking about in the previous episodes, it doesn't really stop. I still experience it. And sometimes, like I was mentioning earlier, it's not a logical thing. It's not a straight line. I would feel it. And this time it's an interesting experience because previously it would all just be blame on myself and hate on myself. But now that I'm a bit more forgiving of myself because I accept who I am as a person, it's a strange feeling because I still sometimes feel that aching from the sadness. But I'm not quick to put that on me. I'm not quick to put myself down and tell myself that my existence is a waste of oxygen. That's not to say I still don't get thoughts like that, but I'm just better at sort of being aware of those thoughts and setting them aside and not letting it overtake my consciousness. But it's definitely an interesting thing, and it's a sort of a new thing in my life that I kind of have to learn how to deal with now. But at the same time, it's still depression, and it's something that I've been dealing with pretty much my entire life. And I'm hanging in there. I'm doing the best that I can. And what I've been saying the past 2 podcasts, that I'm happier overall, is still holds true. That still hasn't changed. But I just wanted to be able to say that it's still there. And that's the thing with depression, especially the more severe types of depression. And by the way, cannot recommend enough, if you're going through a difficult time and you feel like you're depressed and you don't know how to handle it, and it's come to the point where it's debilitating your life, please talk to somebody. And further than that, seek help from a professional, because it's not easy to deal with. You need a support system. As much as I'm happy to talk about the progress that I've made these past few years and how I feel like my life has completely changed, I didn't do that by being on an island alone. I have a great support system that I'm eternally grateful for. My family, My two lovely siblings that I don't know what I would do without them. They've helped me so much. They've helped me get through so many difficult situations in my life. And also my closest friends, who I trust basically like a sibling. So you are strong, you know? I want you to know that. If you're listening right now and you're experiencing depression and you're having a difficult time, I want you to know that you are strong. You have it in you to rise above. You have it in you to be able to live a fulfilling life, a fulfilling, meaningful life. You do. But the battle against depression is a very difficult one. And there is absolutely no shame in admitting that. And there is absolutely no shame in you opening up about it and reaching out to the people that you love about it. That's honestly one of the best first steps that I don't want to say recommend, like, because I said I'm not an expert, but I think that's something that you might want to strongly consider if you're going through this. And you have it in you to hang in there. You can. There is something on the other end, you know? Even though you don't know what's on the other side, even though you don't know what's waiting for you, even if you were able to hang on. And I know it's the default thinking when it comes to that is that there is nothing on the other side, and that hanging on is pointless because you're just tiring yourself out. You know, there's no rescue, there's no help. There is, I promise you. There is. There are people out there that love you. There are people out there that care about you, even though you feel like there aren't any. Even though you say, oh, I don't have a supportive family, or I don't have any friends. And I understand that. I really do. And your feelings are valid. But there are still people out there that care about you nonetheless. Because despite so much negativity happening in the world today, this might be a naive take, but I still feel that people in general are mostly good. In the first episode, I ended with saying there is good in you. I believe that wholeheartedly. And you being in this world, it's important. You're important. You are good. You bring a light to this world. You bring light to it. And depression tries to snuff that light out. For people on the other side, you know, and I mean for those who have a loved one, a friend or whatever that's going through depression and you're not sure what to do, just reassure them that you're there. You don't necessarily have to figure out an answer or a solution. You don't necessarily have to be able to change their lives. You can just be there. Even just letting them know that if you need them, or if they need you, that you'd be there for them anytime. They might not reach out to you, but them knowing that is already a big deal. And of course, I'm not advocating for you to always be selfless. You also have to watch out for yourself, because it is a heavy task taking on other people's feelings, and when they're going through depression, it's not an easy thing. It's a good thing, it's a selfless thing, it's an admirable thing to be able to help someone in need like that. And I wouldn't think twice, personally, especially if it was somebody that I care about or somebody that I loved. But just know yourself is what I'm saying. I'm not saying to just blindly always be available. But with that said, just them knowing that you're there is such a big deal. And I'm speaking from experience. Because when I was going through tough times like that, just knowing that people are there for you, that they care about you, and that they love you, that was enough. Of course, it was always really nice whenever there was a chance to conversate, when there was a chance to have a good sit down, and talk. But whenever that's not available, just knowing that they're there is already a godsend. I suspect there's going to be a lot of post-internal thinking and contemplation for me after this episode. I never take this lightly, this topic of depression and talking about it. And not just depression, just, mental health and mental illnesses. It's a difficult thing to think about because it's not very tangible, compared to other personal health issues. But it is just as devastating when it's not dealt with or taken care of. Depression just stops time. It makes you feel stuck. It makes you feel like you're not going anywhere. Like a state of living death. That emptiness kills any chance for living a fulfilling or meaningful life. It feels like you're not growing. But I think that's not necessarily true. See, as negatively as depression has affected my life, I really think that it contributed to the person who I am today. I'm not perfect, and I will make mistakes. That's going to be a constant. I'm human. But I know myself, and I know I try to be kind. I try to be thoughtful. I try to be considerate. I try to be respectful. And I truly believe that experiencing depression and being so anxious is kind of enhanced. Yeah, I think it's kind of enhanced those qualities in me. I say that because I experienced what it's like to not have those things. And I realized that I wanted to give it to people so that they may never experience, or at least their experience of depression is minimized compared to how I felt and how I experienced it. Because I feel that I didn't get any of that for a lot of my life, for a lot of my existence. And I know now that that's partly untrue, partly because when I'm in there, when I'm in the pit, it's hard to see that sort of thing unless it's blatantly upfront and forward. And I realized a lot of the self-loathing and the self-hatred I had for myself was because I had so much love and care for the people around me, for the people that I loved and cared about. I could provide that to people. I could give that to people. I was willing to give that. I wanted to give that to people, to my friends, not just people, to people that I loved, my friends, my family. But I didn't want to give that to myself because I felt like I didn't deserve it. There's a saying, a common saying that says, depression is anger. Anger turned towards yourself, turned inwards. And I understand what that means all too well. And like I said earlier, depression isn't all the same, but that's just my personal experience. I hated myself because I couldn't love myself. I hated myself because the care, the consideration, the selflessness, I couldn't give that to myself. And all, the negative experiences that I went through in the last few years has helped me to see the folly in that. And now I really do believe and feel that I'm much better at that. So even though I felt like I was stagnant and I wasn't growing, I was. Because see, I think despite the feelings of emptiness and hopelessness that you feel when you're depressed, I think intuitively and potentially subconsciously, your body, your mind, your soul, whatever, your heart, is still trying to find a way to grow and get out of that situation. And I think anybody going through depression is capable of doing that. I know it's hard, and I'm not trying to downplay or belittle the challenge that comes with trying to live with depression. But I want you to know that I believe you can do it. I believe that you can rise above. And if anything, if you feel like you don't have anybody in your life that cares about you, know this: I do. If there's something that you want to talk about or you want to say, feel free to leave comments or just send me a message, and I will do my best to read over it. At the very least, just be there as a friend to listen. I want to leave you with something that I observed recently, and I promise it'll tie into this. I'm growing a couple of cannabis plants. I especially love gardening with plants that have some kind of utility. And I'm somewhat of a cannabis enthusiast. I'm growing a couple of Northern Lights strains. They're growing healthily and beautifully right now. And don't worry, in Canada it's completely legal. Per household you can grow up to 4 plants. When I first planted the seeds, only one of them had sprouted. The other planter still had a flat surface of soil, even though the other one had already started growing and climbing towards the light that I had set up. After 2 weeks, I still hadn't noticed anything. And I thought it might have been a failed seed. I just left it there anyway. Till one day I noticed something popping out of the soil. Something had broken the surface of the soil. And I was excited because now I know it wasn't a failed seed, but something didn't look right. And then I realized it was the root coming out of the ground. So it was quite clear to me that the seed had grown upside down. So I gently, very gently, because cannabis seedlings are very sensitive at this stage, I very gently unearthed the seed from the soil. And sure enough, on the other end, the initial leaves of the seedling were out, and they were in the soil. And the root must have been very confused receiving light and was telling the plant that there is light that's the other way. All I did was I gently came and checked up on it, helped out where I could, reoriented it so that the leaves would face the light, and now it's growing healthy and normally. And in a few months, it's going to be a big, healthy plant. with lots of flowers, hopefully. But my point is, sometimes we don't know that we're growing because we feel like we're in the dark. There's no way that we're growing. But in some capacity, we're still trying to go towards the light. We're still trying to improve. We're still trying to grow and be stronger. And we don't necessarily know that we are. And that's why we do our best to hang in there. And sometimes all you need is a little helping hand to straighten you back out. And really, sometimes that's all it takes. And that truly gives me hope for the future. And I hope it also gives you hope. That's it for this week. I hope you guys have a wonderful week coming up. And I'll see you next time. Take care.